Okay, it's March 2022, which means that it's been 2 years since we planted our property here in the high jungle of northern Peru. So today I'm gonna take a little walk around the property, show you some of the good and the bad and the ugly of what we've done here. And down there is one of the ugly parts. Not necessarily ugly, but just one of the least successful areas on the property with the least amount of growth. This entire slope here, right below the hill where we have our house, it's probably seen the least amount of growth out of everything. So you can see a little bird's eye view from up here on top of the hill. The weeds are about the same size as the trees, so even if we leave the property and don't do any more maintenance, probably most of the trees here on this slope would still make it, but the growth rate is a lot slower overall compared to the rest of the property. And there's that area, which is one of the rare flat areas of our property, and that area's been pretty successful compared to this upper slope here. This slope right here is the hillside that goes up to one of the highest points on the property, so I'm gonna hike up there and get a good view of pretty much everything down below. You can see a lot of the neighbors' properties too. This is one of the highest points on the property. We've got a nice little hammock here in the shade of the forest, and we actually planted coconuts all the way up to here. A lot of them have been getting killed by rats though. You can see there's one here that got chewed out. So coconuts are one of the least successful plants that we planted here, partly because of the climate, and also it just seems like we've lost a lot of them to rodents. There's our house down there. We got the solar panels up on the roof, 6.4 kilowatts. And here I am with the bird's eye view of the slope that I just showed you. You can see we just came through and did machete circles around each tree, so it is a little bit more visible where we have each tree. Eventually we would like to use animals for maintenance, because it costs us about 20,000 soles per year to be doing maintenance with machete and weed whackers. Although we need to wait a long time because those are pretty small trees. I'll go down there and give you a closer look so you can have an idea just what kind of size they are compared to me. So that area over there, that's our other property. We actually bought this property because we wanted the property that I'm standing on, but it didn't have access to the road over there, so we had to buy that other property so we'd have access, because in between us and that property is the neighbor's property. They have access all along the road there, and this property that I'm standing on is isolated. You'd have to pass through other people's property to get here, and that was definitely a deal breaker. Luckily the neighbor was selling the property over there at the same time as this one, so we were able to buy both of them at the same time from separate sellers. And we have a little like an old house down there that we use mostly for storage, and then we've weed whacked our access, which is that long brown strip over there, and you can see the gate, the entrance to our property. And over there we've actually had pretty good growth, so you can see it's actually starting to look like a forest over there on that slope. One thing I like about standing up here is you have a good vantage point of all the surrounding properties over in that direction too. Our property boundary runs pretty much along that tree line down there, which is a creek. And over there you can see that we have a lot of deforestation. Trying to add up how we can find good economics from reforesting a landscape. It does take a long time, and we started this place without any short-term profit in mind. We've already had ice cream beans and little things like that, but as opposed to cash crops, avocados, anything along those lines, it's gonna take still a few more years before we get a decent amount of production. You can see the neighbors on the other extreme, no reforestation, overgrazed. Even now during the rainy season, you can notice how brown their slope looks over there. Major erosion problems. They don't even have any forest buffer along the creek, so you can see how the cows go straight into the creek and there's no protection. The mud just kind of erodes and slides into the creek. Not what you're supposed to do in this part of the world. There are regulations against that, but nobody really does anything here. So there's just not a lot of thought that goes into future generations and what we're leaving for the next generations. And our property kind of looked like that too when we bought it, you know. It's just had cows on it for a really long time and not the best grazing habits. People tend to overgraze and keep their livestock in one place for too long. So we've had a lot of compaction issues. And the weird thing about the slope that we have down here, where we've seen the least amount of growth compared to the rest of the property, is the soil is very strange. It's almost like a topsoil that's sandy, except at the same time it's almost always soggy. So we actually found a spot there where we were able to dig a little pond, and basically, you know, you could step the heel of your foot into the ground and leave a little indentation, and within a half hour the indentation fills up with water. So that's the kind of soil pretty much along this whole slope, even along the ridges, the higher parts of the slope. I mean, obviously where we dug the pond there is in a valley, but even some of these drier areas that are along the ridge, those actually are pretty soggy too. And consequently, we analyzed the soil, very acidic soil. This is before we planted everything. And so down there where it kind of flattens out, you know, the soggy issues are pretty bad. Even in the middle of the dry season, you can go a month without rain and it's still really soggy down there. And so we planted a guaje, which you can see all the way down there, which is a water-loving native palm with a fatty fruit that tastes delicious. And those are pretty popular in commerce. So we planted, I think, about 400 to 500 of those total on our property. And you just want to focus those in the areas where the soil is soggy or where there's standing water. So that's what we did. Here I am now on that lower slope that I was showing from above. There's the pond right there. And you can see here a few examples of some of the plants and the growth we've had in this area. So in general, even the weeds don't grow as much here. And we have this precatoria grass that was here initially, and it's also, even that's not growing very well in this part of the property. So we have an ice cream bean, for example. Compared to me, you can see that's very small, and that's 2 years. So we got a lot more years to go if we want to have cows on this part of the property. There's a cherimoya right there, which is also pretty small, still shorter than me. So these are sorts of things where even if the cows don't eat them, they might just step on them or rub against them and knock them over. I'm gonna walk over here. There's a small avocado right there. This, I believe, is caoba, which is an endangered species of timber that they have here. So we planted a few of those. There's an ice cream bean. Looks like it's been hit with some leafcutter ants. The pomarosa tree. Another avocado, not doing very well. That's a caimito. Mango. And here is probably the best avocado on this entire slope. So if I go next to it, I think it's just about the same height as me, so almost 2 meters tall. We have an ice cream bean. It's one of the better ice cream beans here on this slope. Some decent looking mango. There's a coconut, that's pretty cool. Because like I said, we've lost a lot of coconuts, so it's always encouraging to still see some. This was a citrus plant that somehow made it into the mix. You can see we've got nice pasture grass, nice precatoria there, which is good fodder for the cows. Very common around here. It's pretty much the #1 planted grass for people's livestock. It's not really good for other animals, basically just for cows. But then as you get down here, sort of transition into this other bunch grass, which isn't as palatable, and it just gets a lot more soggy when you get down here onto the lower slope. You can see, I mean, even the weeds here don't grow very much. So if I look out that way, you mostly just see weeds. There's really not a lot of evidence of the trees, and that's because, you know, it's still, everything's pretty small here. So here's an example of one of the aguaje palms. This one's doing pretty well. And we've got a number of them planted down here. Just because this is where a lot of the water accumulates in the soil. You can see there's water right there. That's the proper habitat for that palm tree. And we have some other plants. There's an ice cream bean. It's a little bit higher up, so it's not sitting in water. Have another smaller aguaje right there. This is one of the timber species. Some more aguajes. And then this palm tree over here, that's called Huasai. It's actually the sister plant of Acai, and this is the biggest specimen of Huasai that we have on the entire property right here. So now I'm gonna go into this little flat area here. It's where the previous owner used to have his house, in this area. And you can see things are a little bit more developed, a little bit more successful in this area. This is really thick pasture grass right here. But you can see that it's starting to turn into a forest. When you look over that way, it's a lot more developed. There's a big mango tree right there. That was already here when we bought the property. We haven't had any production off of the existing mango trees so far. And that's been 2 years now, not a single fruit. We planted 1,000 of our own, so we'll be able to get an idea if maybe there's some that are successful out here. You can see this area is a lot more developed than the slope that I was just on. Of course, we got a lower area right here where the water drains to, which we planted all with aguaje palms there. This right here is our best macadamia that we planted, and that's not saying very much. This thing's pretty tiny. I'm not sure why, but this is definitely not the right site for macadamia cultivation. This is an existing caimito tree from when we bought the property. There were a couple of these species of tree on the property, and this year they actually fruited, so that's encouraging. It's a very delicious fruit. It's a relative of the lucuma. So this right here was a pihuaya. This is one of the least successful trees that we planted. And this is one that the rats really like, because you actually use this species for palm hearts. So they love to go after the palm hearts. And that one doesn't have any branches, so that one's gone. There's the place I was just walking, the flat area down below, and the slope over there. Now I'm gonna walk over to the other slope, the other hillside that we have, and show you the area of our property with the best growth. This is the area of the property that I filmed last year for the 1-year anniversary video. So you can see the difference from 1 year to the next. And I'll leave a link to that other video in the description. But I'd like to go check out some of the same trees that I was looking at in that video. So here's one of the Majambo trees. I think I filmed that in last year's video. And now it's already starting to flower, and looks like we even have the first couple of fruit already developing right there. There's another one over there. That's the first time I've seen fruit from any of these trees on our property. And that's really exciting. This is one of the best fruits that you can have in this part of the world. Edible fruit and seeds, which are a good subsistence food. Taste just as good as roasted pumpkin seeds. And you can see this area is already starting to look like a forest. All these ice cream beans are over 2 meters tall. We've got a nice closed canopy here. The Schizalobium legumes are getting huge here. And we've got an area here with one of the biggest avocados on the property. It's right down in that area. It's a nice wildflower right there. And yeah, you can see that got that really nice avocado right there. And that area is turning into a little patch of forest. This tree is called Palio. It's one of the most successful native fruit trees for our property right here. Okay, so this is part of the area that I filmed last year. And now it's definitely turning into a forest. We got 2 ice cream beans already closing canopy right there. There's a small Amazon tree grape growing over here. Another big ice cream bean tree right there. Really well developed mango. And then I think this is the cherimoya tree that I filmed in last year's video. And you can see it's a big difference from that video just in 1 year. This actually is not the most successful area of the property. I'm gonna go show you that area right now. I'm heading into the most successful area of our property. This is an area of the property, for whatever reason, has grown the most. Looks like it has the best soil out of the whole property. Maybe it's the part of the property that's been the least amount of time as cattle pasture. Pretty much all the species that we planted over here grow really well. We just had our chicken tractors over in this area for about 2 months. You can see there's a lot of big specimen trees here. There's a nice avocado right there. It's a pomarosa. Ice cream beans all over the place. There's one existing giant forest tree right there. Got mangoes that are successful in here. Some of our biggest specimens from the whole property are located in this area. That's one of the Taperebas, Spondius dulces. And I forget what they call it in America. There's another Majambo tree over there. Really big Schizalobiums. It's a nice Amazon tree grape. Some avocados over here that we've been having trouble with them. They've been falling over. So I'm not sure why that's happening. It's another Amazon tree grape. One of the biggest caimitos right there from the whole property. Got a nice cherimoya right behind it over there. And this area is really starting to look like a forest more than any other part of the property. There's another nice avocado. There's a pihuayo. At this point, this pihuayo palm is probably too big for the rats to kill it, so it looks like that one's good to go. We got some of our chickens that still like being in this area. They're here. Can kind of give you a reference as to how big the trunk is on this Schizalobium. Everything here was stuff that we planted 2 years ago. And that's our biggest cherimoya right there that was in my last video. We got some of these native elephant ear plants that are volunteering all over the place. There's a smaller avocado, but very healthy. Have some more palms up there. And you can see this area is already giving us a feel of a real forest. You can see some of the ice cream beans are huge in here as well. And a lot of this area was actually this planted to this elephant grass. So you can see this grass is really tall. It's a good biomass producer. So we come in here every once in a while. It's actually easier to handle that with a machete than with a weed whacker. So you just cut those back and it serves as a really good mulch. This right here is called a huito, Genipa americana. It's a nice native plant to the Amazon. We have a purple version of the elephant grass right there. And so this is the area of the property that's the biggest. Now I wish everywhere on the property looked like this. I would say if it did, we could probably switch over to maintenance with animals here probably within the next year. But since you've seen some of the other parts of the property, it's still going to take a while before we can run animals in those parts. Maybe we can just start out here with 1 or 2 cows, rope off a couple hectares, and see how they treat the area. See if it's even a good idea to do that so soon. Okay, so that's a glimpse of our food forest project now, 2 years from after we planted. And I guess you'll have to stay tuned for year 3 next year, but I'll try and upload some other updates before then. Okay, so we'll catch you on the next video. Bye.